Good morning, everybody. Um, it's Rescue Boss. It is 10 a.m. on the 22nd of February, and I thought I'd wear my shirt where it says "We're back." It's for Penn State, but I thought it was funny because make a good opening saying that we're back, and I'm doing a video today. Um, I thought I'd do a video on a little bit of threat assessment for your own area and what are some of your plans. So today I thought, well, I'd go over a little bit about it. I'm not going to disclose anything that'll give away some of my intel. Excuse me for taking a sip, but I figured I'd go over a little bit. One, when you're doing a threat assessment, what are your thoughts? What are you worried about? What are you planning for? And part of that is you got to look at your population area where you're at. One of the biggest things I can tell you is where I am at in Pennsylvania, believe it or not, we have over 12 million people in the state of Pennsylvania. That's reported. So there's a lot of people in the area. But you got to look at your demographics for your area, your population in your specific county, what resources are there, and your stuff like that. So you want to look at that. And a lot of that information you can go and look up your county and Google it and see what it says. You know, what type of history is involved in your area, what water sources are there, etc. And some of this you may even find located in your emergency management agency's plans for the area where you live, for the county. Because each county has to have a plan. Doesn't mean that they're online, but they have to have an emergency plan and what their typical threat assessments are, or what do they think is going to happen that they're planning for. So you want to have that plan in play. So you got to think about that when you're doing your plan. What are your nearest cities? What are their populations that are near you? The crime assessment for your area. A lot of times you can go to different websites and look that up, like Neighborhood Watch or stuff like that, and that'll give you a lot of information on the type of crimes in your area. And some of the crimes in our area include auto theft, arson, regular theft, burglaries, and assaults. Of that, the two highest are theft and assaults in the town where I live, which is under 1,000 people. So those numbers are considered a little high because there's 5 incidents of each for theft and assault. So you want to look at that. Some of the other things you want to look at are special landmarks. And believe it or not, one of our biggest threats, and people may not consider it, is a temple, for a Hindu temple. And believe it or not, they get over 100,000 visitors a year at that facility. Is that a major threat? Maybe not, but it could be, especially the way things are nowadays. Transportation. What highways are in your areas? Are they a threat? How far away are you from them? Stuff like that. Some other things I've looked at is the disasters for our area, which have been presidential declarations of disasters, which have been 20 from 1955 through December 31st, 2017. That doesn't include the disasters from 2018 and 2019 so far. So some of those would include the major flooding that we've had in the county. So you want to look at those type of events that have occurred. Then some other ones would be your local disasters or regional disasters or state disasters that have occurred. You want to look at that type of stuff. If you go into your county EMA's plan, a lot of times they'll tell you what they're planning for your specific county. Some of the biggest ones that they're planning for would be blight, drought, water emergencies, flooding, winter storms, radon, hurricane windstorm damage, a nuclear incident. Most of that's relating to power plants, which are considered all high risk. Moderate would be hazardous materials, dam or levee failure, wildfire, and a mine accident. And then low would be a tornado. So that's some of the stuff they've looked at with their plan. Believe it or not, in Pennsylvania, where I live, we've had 13 recorded tornadoes. 7 were EF1, 2 have been EF2s, which aren't really a major risk for some areas, but when you look at this area, that's considered a little bit of a risk hazard. And another example is the county next door. We've had 3.0 or 4.0 earthquakes, which you don't normally always hear of in Pennsylvania, but it's things we need to look at when you're making your threat assessment plan. When I talked about blight properties, they are vacancy properties, which can be a hazard because during an SHTF or whatever incident, those properties, people could burn them. They could be used for hoarding. If they're vacant, they become an issue because people may try to burn them, which could set off a whole block. A perfect example was yesterday in a town on the other end of the county. They actually had a row go up when the fire department first arrived. Before the first piece even got there, they had fire in 5 to 6 homes on dispatch. When they arrived, it turned out those 5 to 6 homes were 3, we call them twins, which are double block homes. So they had 3 of those rows already off with extension going up the block. So I tell people, picture that can happen during a disaster, and who's coming to fight it? Who's going to put the fire out? So that becomes a major hazard. And one of the other things they had that people don't think about was they had fire start on another house I don't know if it was a half a block away, but it must have been embers or whatever landed on the house and started a fire on the outside of the house. So I tell people that does happen also. So that's some of the hazards you've got to think about when you're building a plan. Some of the major issues are there railways near you, gas pipelines in your county, major roadways, SARA facilities, which are hazardous materials facilities. How about power plants? Big thing is we have at least 2 power plants that could affect where I live. Dam failures or levees. We actually do have a dam upwind from us, but on the threat analysis, if that something would happen to that dam, it would only affect roughly 14 homes, 14 people, um, due to the way the town's built. So we would be in half decent shape here. It would probably cut off our one way out of town, but we would still have other means of getting out of town by going the opposite direction. Crime in PA, I actually went to I can't remember the site. It's a national site that the FBI and everybody uses. So I looked up that information for the crimes, property crimes, violent crimes in PA, and what those numbers look like. Some other things I did assessing on is sexual predators. If you go to the Megan sites, that's only going to tell you if the people are reporting it, but it'll tell you who is in your local area. You can do it down the town, county, whatever. It'll tell you if they live there or if they actually work in your town. Some other things that I've listed is not as a hazard, which it could be, but it also could be for resource management, would be rivers, ponds, the dam that I talked about, reservoirs, secondary streams versus rivers, and listed them because they may be of a resource. So I could go fishing, getting water. Yes, I'd still have to prepare it if I wanted to use it for drinking water, by either filtering it, boiling it, doing both, whatever. But having those capabilities during a disaster could be very important. So I looked at that also. Then I started listing some of my threats that I think would be issues. And I made a list of threats from global to local to personal. These aren't my threats, but these are threats that I think you need to look at. Like a global threat. What's a global threat? Would be a nuclear attack, pandemic, meteor strike, magnetic pole shift, just say. I'm not saying these occur, but these are threats, when you're doing your plan, are you considering these? A national event would be government change, sort of like what's going on in Venezuela and some of the other countries where the governments are fighting. A conventional war on U.S. grounds. How about an electrical grid failure and or currency collapse? Then we could look at regional events, would be hurricanes, flooding, blizzards, ice events, earthquakes, nuclear or chemical attacks. They're considered regional events, which would be county or hemisphere type events. They're rare. Same with national events are rare. Or I'm sorry, the national would be the country or hemisphere. Regional would be multi-state or in the region. Local would be your counties, towns, and neighborhoods. That would be severe weather, active shooter, water issues, road closures, shelter in place, and depending on the event that was going on, could be considered regional. Personal, happens daily in our lives, would be job loss, long-term illness, or weather events. Lately, the way Pennsylvania been, I don't know how many days the schools have been closed this year so far due to the weather. So that's things you got to think about when you're making your threat plan. Some other things you got to think about is risks, dependencies, assumptions, and constraints. So when you make your plan, what are your risks? How are you going to mitigate that strategy? and a contingency. Risk is realized, and what's that backup plan? Just say one of them would be road closure, checkpoints, or traffic jams. So for road closure, do you have an alternate route? Would be your mitigation strategy. Your contingency would be having 3 viable routes. If it's a checkpoints, do you have secondary roads you can use? Do you have radio communications, that you can monitor? CB radios, scanners, ham radios, whatever you have available to be able to try to get an intel of what's going on out there. Traffic jam, how do you avoid it? The mitigation strategy would be to leave early and then scout ahead time. Having a scout vehicle out in front to see what's going on, And then you can go all the way down through that. You have escalation plans on how you're going to respond. The plan, your escalation, the event escalates before you can respond. What do? You have an alternate route, which would be 3 viable routes, alternate plan, 3 alternate transportation scenarios, and if all else fails, you have a stay put plan. Buckle up and stay put of where you're at. That's some things you got to think about. No barter supplies. Have a good tradable skill is key, and we talked about that on the Prepper X and X Nation channels. If you don't, can you merge with somebody else? Become a resource for them. Some things people don't think about. What happens if someone has beaten you to your retreat as a risk? What's your mitigation strategy? Get there early would be one of them, right? And, expect company. If they beat you there, contact them to merge. But don't expect them to be friendly would be a contingency. Can you scout and raid? If so, have a good raiding plan. Are some things we got to look at. What happens if you have the mob overrun you at your current destination? Maybe getting further away into a deeper area. Group together for additional strength. Having a good defensive plan is going to be key. So that's some of the things we got to think about when we're making plans. And in your plan, you also got to think about transportation and moving. How you're going to move stuff and things like that. So you got to think about vehicle capabilities and stuff. And we've talked about this also. But some of the requirements for your vehicle may be all-terrain ability, being able to carry weight and people, having capabilities to push, winching, or plowing vehicles, debris, barricades, etc. out of the way. So then, do you have thoughts on a vehicle at your retreat that's quiet in operation, agile, quick, and fuel efficient? So some things that you may want to think about is do you have a vehicle? Typically, most people are going to pick an SUV, pickup truck, some way to haul, equipment, personnel, having a scanner and stuff like that in it. And some things I thought about would be, how about fire trucks? During an SHTF, they may be abandoned. And a fire truck's going to give you some of that capability. It may have four-wheel drive. It may have radios that you wouldn't even think about. So that may be a resource you may want to think about. The older mail trucks, like the Jeeps, buses, snow plows or town snow plows, garbage trucks. Remember, they're going to be hard to stop. Supply hauling and people moving capabilities. So it's going to give you some chances of doing some of that. Trailers, issues to consider is How about turning it around? How about detour and avoiding roadblocks if you had to go off-road with that trailer? Do you have that capability? And how about if you had to reverse at a high rate of speed? You know, you may not have that capability with a trailer. This is only as far as I got in my threat plan. I still have a lot of work to do, but I wanted to bring some of this stuff out because I think it's something you got to look at when you're building your plan. Some things I want to do with my plan yet is list resources that are in the area. Do you have junkyards that, you know, during a SHTF, could you go out there and get alternators? Could you get batteries, car batteries? Do they have propane forklifts out there that you could get the propane off of them? Any type of resources that you may be able to get to use to better your conditions may be key. And this is during a worst case scenario. This is not everyday life. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just giving you thought processes. This is all new to me. So please don't take my word for it. I'm going by what I know, what I'm learning as I go. So I think you need to think about some of this, because how many people have really thought about this? You're preparing, but have you made a plan to go with your preparedness? And what are you going to do is when that time happens, what are you going to do? Do you have stuff in place? So hopefully it makes you think a little bit. Let me know what you think. Like I said, this is not even the tip of an iceberg of a plan. It's just things that I'm looking at and then going to build my contingency off of that. I don't have all the capabilities. I do have some plans in play that if it was a localized event here, which way am I going to go? I have a couple options. You know, but when you do your plan, do you have a plan going north? Do you have a plan going south? Do you have a plan to go east? Do you have a plan to go west? And if so, where are you going to go and what are your plans? So that's things to look at when you're building your plan. So hopefully you find this useful. Let me know what you think. This is Rescue Boss. I'll be signing out. Thank you. God bless. Be safe.